Hey, come see us on tour. We'll be in Chicago, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Duluth, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta, Jacksonville, Florida, Tempe, Arizona, and Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets. So I want to switch the subject now and show you this, which...
Yep.
So breaking, $2.9 trillion have been wiped out from stocks this morning. This is from August 2nd. Is that today? Today's August 2nd, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's from this morning due to fears of a global recession. The worst day since the 2020 COVID crash happened today. Now, I've been telling people this, and I took my money out of the stock market. I put my money in gold. I put my money in T-bills and Bitcoin. And I have an annuity I can't get out of, so that's in there for life. But so here it is, $2.9 trillion wiped from stocks in one day as recession fears mount. Here, let's do the story real quick. The stock market is bearing the brunt of recessionary concerns in the United States, with most equities registering significant sell-offs. Particularly in a staggering blow to the markets, $2.9 trillion was wiped from stocks in the early trading hours of August 2nd amid mounting fears of a global recession. The sharp sell-off marks the worst day since the 2020 COVID-19 crash. The ongoing sell-off was earlier highlighted by movement in the Magnificent Seven tech giants. As reported by Finbold, these companies have collectively witnessed a swing of over $3 trillion in market value within the past 3 weeks, raising more concerns about the possibility of an economic downturn. The growing concerns also rattled investors in Europe and Asia. Notably, there are overarching concerns that the U.S. might be sliding towards a recession, spurring a global sell-off that intensified after a poor employment report revealed a rapidly cooling jobs market, driving up the unemployment rate. Now, two things I want to say here is that I've said this year that it feels like they're keeping things together with duct tape and bubble gum just until
they ran out of duct tape and now they just have Scotch tape.
Yes, just until the election to get Biden across the finish line, and then it's all going to go to shit, and then they don't care because they already got Biden, and then if it's Trump, well, then they can blame it all on Trump anyway. So this seems to be, my spidey senses were right. Let me finish this article. It says, the economy added 114,000 workers last month, falling well short of the economist's expectations of 185,000 jobs. Now, two things about that. You know that the unemployment rate is not real, that it's much higher than they say it is because they count it in a much different way than they're supposed to. They used to, up until the 80s, they used to count it for real, and now it's a fake one, right? And so the unemployment rate, if they say it's 4%, it's probably 15 to 20%. That's what I've heard from people in the know. Okay. So now they've also, when they say, hey, we added 114,000 jobs for the last about year, every time they say they've added this amount of jobs, they've gone back a month later and quietly adjusted that number down, sometimes way down. So you can't even trust that number. So it's probably lower than that. So, okay, so those are the two things I want to tell you about the unemployment. So with the unemployment rate reaching 4.3% in July, if anybody thinks it's really 4.3%, I've got a vaccine I'd like to sell you. The 3-month moving average is at least 0.5 percentage points above the minimum of the previous 12 months averages. This triggers the SOM rule, which signals a recession. What's the SOM rule? Well, according to them, reaching the 0.5% threshold indicates a recession. When the jobless rate rises quickly, it suggests the economy is slumping. So they're saying there's going to be a recession. Their own rule says it, and now they just lost $2.9 trillion from the stock market this morning. So it looks like my predictions are right, but guess who else's prediction? You've been predicting this. You posted this on January 1st, predicting they would pop the biggest market bubble of all time this year. I don't think that's happening today. I expect they'll try to time it to the election if they can, just like I was saying, depending on who's going to pop it before or after. So what would you like to say to this news story?
Well, real quick, before we get too far off the SOM rule, which is the rule that defines if we're in a recession, might be a good day to go and take screenshots of the definition of the SOM rule, because it'd be a great time for them to rewrite the definition of the SOM rule so that we're not in a recession just like the last time.
You
saying.
Okay. Just like they also changed the definition of a vaccine.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, yeah, you're exactly right that this is, people have been doom and glooming and like talking about this everything bubble for quite some time, but we are seeing it culminate in new ways. And the Japanese yen situation that is happening right now, it's kind of obscure to a lot of people, but the economy of Japan is deeply tied into the rest of the global economy, and it is currently in really bad shape. And they have been just infinitely printing yen in order to plaster over it and try to keep it pegged. And it's a little complicated, but it is not looking good. Pair that with what's happening in China's real estate and financial markets. Like, we saw banks go down like 4 and 5% today. Like JP Morgan was down 4 to 5% today. That is massive for the big banks. So I don't think that it's going to happen today. I think that this is probably just them stealing a bunch of traders' money, and then they're going to artificially keep pumping it up because that's how the market works. But they're certainly ready to collapse it because financial systems can only be propped up for so long.
And so what do you think is going to happen when this? Do you think this crash will be worse than the 2008 crash? And what do you think will be able to, I don't think we'll be able to recover like we were from that last one because they're exhausted the mechanisms to fix it, which is money printing. But go ahead.
No, I think you're right that we are in a different stage now than we were in 2008. And when you look at the cycles that global reserve currencies go through, that empires go through, empires rise and fall, currencies rise and fall, and the British Empire and the British pound had their time, and that is repeated over and over throughout history. And the US dollar is clearly in its decline, in its inflationary cycle that indicates, it's like a black hole. One of my favorite X accounts that does macro finance is called Peruvian Bull. And he's been doing a whole series for the last 5 years called the Dollar Endgame that has predicted years in advance the cycle that we're going through right now, that basically shows that we are past the event horizon of this black hole where the gravity of our debt is forcing us to print so fast that we are pulling ourselves faster and faster into that future collapse. And there's no returning back out past that debt, envelope. We're in it. And it's going to keep accelerating. And I think that the banking class know this. Like, the banking class are professionals at controlling global reserve currencies. And they've been passing that knowledge down through their families for generations. And so the way I see it is they are very likely trying to orchestrate a currency switch. I would assume, because if I was them, that's what I'd be doing. I would be trying to orchestrate the collapse of the dollar and the jump of all my assets to whatever the next global reserve currency is. But in this situation, we're in a place where now global reserve currencies are probably about to change shapes as well. Whereas it used to be from, the British pound to the US dollar, for example. But now it's probably going to be from the US dollar to a central bank digital currency is likely what they're going to try to do. And I can't think of anything worse for humans than a central bank digital currency. That's the kind of thing we have the Second Amendment for. So, and Bitcoin, thankfully.
Yeah. Well, banks are starting to buy Bitcoin.
They are. They got to control it somehow.
Oh, okay.
It's hard to say what's going to happen. People have this theory that it's like a CIA creation, and maybe, but like the technology is the technology. It's kind of, it's been examined a million times.
Yeah,
it's kind of uncorruptible. As long as the internet exists, Bitcoin will exist.
If it's a CIA creation, it seems like, to me, again, I'm not an expert, but it seems like, well, why would they want to create something that could be used to undermine them and subvert them?
Yeah,
because the Bitcoin can do that.
It fundamentally does do that. As a technology, Bitcoin takes us from money based upon the bank said it's worth something, and it turns it into money based upon the principles of mathematics, which are immutable. And as long as there's an internet connection, that the principles of mathematics cannot be changed. They exist forever. The internet is the only base layer that you need for it to work. And so it fundamentally takes the power of creation of money away from the Federal Reserve and away from the banking class And there's really no answer to it. And so the way I see it is they're going to try to, I think that they orchestrated the crypto crash of the last, I think that Sam Bankman-Fried was either an asset or a patsy, so to speak. And I think that they intentionally deregulated crypto and pumped a whole bunch of scams up and created an environment in which crypto would get obliterated. And I think they planned for it to get obliterated harder, but it kind of popped a little early. And that was, I think, designed in order to discredit crypto long enough for them to get ready to switch over to CBDCs, hopefully before enough people had gotten on the Bitcoin bandwagon and realized, because if the banks can buy up enough Bitcoin and can switch to CBDCs early enough, maybe they can kind of get control over most people's monetary lives. But I think that we're kind of past that. I'm hopeful. I think that we're past that time, and I think that Bitcoin is uncorruptible.
I think so too, and I think
We'll see.
you know, I heard Bobby Kennedy talking about that if he was president, he would buy Bitcoin for as the government would purchase it, and that would get us out of our debt. Because
super bullish. And then I heard that Trump heard him too, and basically gave the exact same speech the next day.
Did he?
Did you see that?
No, yeah, I didn't see that.
I mean, I'm kind of exaggerating, but yeah, Kennedy gave that speech at the Bitcoin conference that was like wildly cool and super. I mean, and it's no surprise because him and Nicole are both totally in the know, and Nicole's a literal blockchain expert. And then the very next day, Trump comes out and gives a speech that's basically all the same talking points, but with less nuance and context because he doesn't understand it the way that Bobby does. And it was still a great speech because it was like, you know, it was pro freedom and it was pro Bitcoin and all that, but it was kind of funny.
Hey, come see us on tour. We'll be in Chicago, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Duluth, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta, Jacksonville, Florida, Tempe, Arizona, and Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets.